To that shortly. I do want to say, first of all, thank you to our greeters who've been serving today, Debbie Davis, Sarah Jones, past president Jason Chaco, and Matt Buchanan. I want to go ahead and welcome to the stage Fran Carter, who I saw a minute ago, who is going to lead our prayer, pledge, and four-way test. And after Fran, we have an introduction of guests from Kim Kirkman. So we'll do those back to back. Come on, Miss Fran.
Thanks, Mitch. Please join me in the Rotary four-way test. Of the things we think, say, or do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Please bow your heads for a brief prayer. As we gather together on this day following Labor Day, help us to be thankful for all those around us who do the work each day to make our lives better. Help each of us to recognize the blessings, both small and large, that surround us every day. Fill our hearts with gratitude and kindness, and help us all to remember to share kindness each day with our words and actions toward those around us. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Very good, thank you. And now let's welcome to the stage Miss Kim Kirkman, who will be introducing our guest, followed by Susan Blair, leading our membership committee, is going to make a couple of introductions. So starting off, Miss Kim.
Thank you. I'd like to welcome our visitors, and when I call your name, if you will stand, and the member that brought you will also stand. Visiting from Rotarac, we have Daniel Frazier. Visiting with Elizabeth Small, we have Sloan Davidson and Mark Funk. With Billy Rowenbeck, Jason Bone. Visiting with William Goolsby, Curtis Goolsby. And I went out of order, but those are all our visitors. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Kim. Susan Blair of our membership committee has some introductions for us. Come on.
Thank you, Mitch. We have a returning member today, Joel Amaro. Joel, come on up. Joel is a client advisor for Our Best Wealth Management. He obtained his bachelor's degree in economics with specialization in international trade from the University of Central Arkansas. After college, he lived in Manhattan for 8 years, where he worked for 2 nonprofit organizations offering arts, education, and cultural programming. He returned to Little Rock in 2017, where he began his career as a financial advisor. Joel and his wife Heather enjoy Little Rock's cultural scene and are members of the Arkansas Museum of Fine Arts and Friends of the Central Arkansas Library System. Joel's hobbies are playing golf, soccer, and chess, and he's working towards proficiency in Spanish. So Joel, we're so glad to have you back at Club 99. We are also pleased to welcome a new member, Ginger Gummelt, and she is sponsored by Elizabeth Small. Dr. Gummelt is Dean of the College of Business, Health, and Human Services at UA Little Rock, a position that she took in July of this year. She previously was with Lamar University in Beaumont, Texas. With 20 years in higher education and social work, Ginger has dedicated her career to serving vulnerable populations and strengthening communities. Her commitment to service extends beyond the classroom. She served as board president for court-appointed advocates of Southeast Texas, advocating for children in the foster care system. She served on the board of the Recovery Council of Southeast Texas, was a member of ExxonMobil Community Advisory Panel, and has served in leadership positions on the Jefferson County Domestic Violence Task Force and the Juvenile Justice Council in Texas. She has coordinated the Do Right Thing campaign, helping youth address violence in their communities, and she's contributed to research supporting the Jefferson County, Texas Adolescent Drug Court. As an educator and scholar, Dr. Gummelt has authored numerous publications and co-authored a book on sports social work. Dr. Gummelt holds a PhD in social work from the University of Texas, and at Texas Women's University, she majored in psychology. She spends much of her spare time in community service and is her dog's favorite walking buddy. Ginger, welcome to Club 99.
Welcome back, Joel. We're thrilled you're joining us again. And Ginger, we're thrilled to have you and your leadership at UA Little Rock. We are in the midst of a real season of growth with Club 99, but we're thrilled both of you are here. We have a collection of members who have returned. Life circumstances have organized that, and we're thrilled about that. And it's always good to see new folks in our community join our mission, and we're thrilled to have both of you. We have a couple of announcements before we get to today's program. One, and you've seen a couple of slides today on this, we are encouraging you to think about Rotaract in your organization. We have a program that we support. Daniel stood here. Chris Dudley, who leads the group this year, are leaders of Rotaract, but it's really an opportunity for us to think about 20-something, maybe early 30-something members of our teams who are interested in getting to know service, getting to expand their networks, getting to kind of connect with mission of Rotary globally, and it's really inexpensive. It's $125 a year that you can invest in a 20-something in your organization to say, I believe in you, I support your growth, and there is a tremendous group that meets monthly at US Pizza, I believe. I think the next meeting is Friday. If you're interested in going to a Rotaract meeting, you can. We go periodically. This club supports that investment in 20 and 30-somethings as they're growing their networks. I've put 4 people of mine, my 20-somethings, into Rotaract, and we're thrilled about that. It's a very low-cost way to get maximum investment, so I encourage you to think about that. If you're interested and have somebody from your organization you'd like to think about Rotaract and investing in that, you can visit with Karen, and there's a really easy process to get them involved in Rotaract as well. So we encourage you to think about that. Also, on your tables is a QR code it would lead you to upcoming programs that we have for Rotary 99. Next week, for instance, Shannon Newton is here talking about the trucking industry. It has a collection of challenges over the last 12 to 18 months that have affected the trucking industry, which is a major source and force in the state of Arkansas. I hope you're here to learn about what's happening there and what's on the horizon for that. But you can take a picture of that QR code, text it to a friend who needs to be here next week or in the coming weeks. You'll see the programs that are coming around the corner. We hope you invite a friend to Rotary. Also, tonight, our engagement committee, specifically the team that's involved in creating unique opportunities for engagement and connection on a personal level. Laza leads that team. We have a reception tonight at the Town Pump, and many of you have already signed up to be there for that. It's going to be fantastic. Obviously it's reopened and been refashioned and reimagined just a little bit with new owners. They've given us an opportunity to host a group there. I believe we have just a few seats left that are unclaimed. If you would like to go, or if you've signed up and want to bring a guest, visit specifically with Karen so we can get those reservations taken care of. But I literally think there's only 4 or 5, maybe 6 left, so this is your last chance to be a part of that special evening tonight at the Town Pump. We're excited about that. We also thought it'd be fun to show you something from our friend and member Terry Rasco. I don't know if you saw the Democrat Gazette a couple of weeks ago, but there was a letter to the editor from Terry, and that was published at the Democrat Gazette, encouraging our community, our leaders, to think about problem solving with the 4-way test. And I appreciated Terry's taking the opportunity to stress that, reminding all of us, Rotary members and non-Rotary members alike, that the way we can move this community forward, the way we can problem solve, the way we can have a healthy dialogue in difficult circumstances is to think about the 4-way test and really applying that in all of our lives, in our business operations. It's not just something we say here, recite here, and leave here. This should be an approach at which we do life with one another, and I appreciate him bringing that to the table. I believe there was a letter following that in the next day or two that sort of seconded his motion. So we appreciate that community engagement on something we hold important, but it is a good reminder that we live out the four-way test every day in terms of how we engage other community members, people with different views, how we handle our staff, those kind of things. So I appreciated his letter. So, yep. We also want to say congratulations. There are a whole host of Club 99 members who just made another trip around the sun and we have a giant birthday list here in Club 99. So for those of you who've made another trip around the sun, congratulations. And we are excited for what is ahead for you and celebrate you all month for another birthday as well. So let's move on to today's program. I am excited about this program in weird ways. About a year ago, maybe 18 months ago, it was brought to my attention that Arkansas had a unique place in the globe in the blueberry fields of study and science and agriculture. And I have never heard of such a thing, that blueberries were sort of, we're noted for blueberries. We're noted for a lot of things, right, in Arkansas. But to be noted globally for the blueberry market is really an unusual thing. It was for me. So I had put this on a tick list to try to have a program about that so that you are educated about this particular program as well. So if we are building a better Arkansas, we are doing that through a whole host of ways, and this one is through both innovation and science and agriculture, where they have combined to do something unique to put Arkansas on the global map. I invite Mandy Richardson to the stage to do a full introduction of our speaker, and then we'll turn it over to Dr. McWhirt. Mandy?
Mitch admittedly has a mental block. It's Blackberries. We've talked about it many times. Bless his heart. Several, but it's all right. We all love blueberries too. It's been an ongoing joke between the two of us, so it was really special to sit here and listen to him say that to you all. I had a really interesting phone call with Amanda McWhirt a few months ago, and this is a program, one of the very first programs Mitch asked me to get on the agenda this year, so I'm really excited. I was really just blown away by the impact that the research that the University of Arkansas does here has such a strong impact on the global market. And Amanda was sharing some of that with me on that phone call, and I know you guys are going to be really intrigued by what she has to share with you today. We don't produce a large quantity of blackberries here in the state, but the research that we do here at the U of A has now grown into many parts of the world. And Amanda will probably share this with you, so I hate to steal some of her thunder, but was sharing that likely if you go anywhere and buy one of those little green cartons of blackberries, it is a strain or a variant that has been created by the research team here in Arkansas. And I think that's pretty phenomenal, the reach that they have throughout the world. Amanda is the Fruit and Vegetable Horticulture Specialist for the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture. She has been named a young professional to watch by the publications Fruit Growers News and Vegetable Growers News, and she was also named one of the 2019 Fruit and Vegetable 40 Under 40. Which is pretty awesome. As a magazine publisher of niche publications, I'm intrigued by all of these very niche publications and awards and love that and know how impactful and meaningful those awards are to someone in that industry. There may not be many people that you will encounter in life more knowledgeable about fruits and vegetables than Amanda, and we are excited to listen to her today as we continue our focus on bringing light to businesses, organizations, and people who are building Arkansas. So please give Amanda McWhirt a great Rotary welcome to the stage.
Well, thank you all so much for the invitation to be here today and have an opportunity to share a little bit about the impact the University of Arkansas has had on the global blackberry market. And we've also had a big impact on blueberries, but that's not the topic of today. We're going to focus on blackberries. And I realize that this may be something that's sort of something you've never considered before, that someone might dedicate their life to studying how to grow blackberries. And I was recently introduced as a blackberry scientist, and I thought that's probably the most concise description of what I do on a daily basis. I do have a research program, so I have graduate students that are studying blackberries and muscadines and other fruits and how to grow them more efficiently in Arkansas. But then I also have a very active extension program. So a lot of what I do on a daily basis is field calls from growers when they're having fertility issues or other problems, or I travel around the state looking at different crops and trying to diagnose what might be going on. And so it's a really fun job for me. I eat a lot of blackberries every year. And I do want to kick things off by asking, how many of you all have ever eaten a blackberry by a show of hands? Oh, I'm so proud of you all. Sometimes I ask that question and people don't even know what I'm talking about, what a blackberry is. And a blackberry, is one of our native crops to the South, and we have really taken it over time and improved upon it. And so if you're familiar with blackberries only in terms of going out to the hedgerow and, there's chiggers and snakes and thorns, that is not today's blackberry. Today's blackberry is a very different thing. So I encourage you to go check out one of your local blackberry farms. And at the end of the presentation, I'll make sure and give you some info on where you can find a local blackberry grower. Because my job is mostly focused on how do we grow a blackberry, I want to talk a little bit about how that is done, just so that we're all on the same page, and then I'll dive into what does the blackberry market look like and how has Arkansas been really influential in that. And so if you see this picture here, this is actually just a planting of blackberries out in Arkansas. If you look on the left-hand side, those are some newly planted plants. So this picture was probably taken towards the end of May, beginning of June. Blackberries are kind of unique for us in terms of our fruit crops, that if you plant a blackberry plant this year, next year you'll have a harvest. And then you can have continuous harvest off that planting for anywhere from 6 to 7 years. And so it's a pretty quick turn on investment for a lot of our growers because they only have to wait a year, compared to something like a peach tree where you might be waiting 3 years, or a pecan tree where you might be waiting 15 to 25 years before you have your first harvest. What's kind of unique about blackberries is that if you look in this picture on the right-hand side, you maybe can kind of see the little red fruit that is starting to develop. Eventually that will turn black and be ready for harvest. But blackberries have a biennial cane structure, which means that every year a new cane comes up out of the ground, or several canes come up out of the ground. And that first year, those canes are just green and growing. They do not flower and they don't produce blackberries. We then carry that blackberry cane, that's called a primocane, over through the winter, and then in its second year, it produces flowers. So every year, the farmer is actually growing next year's canes and producing fruit off of last year's canes. So you're continually doing this renewal within the plant. And that's why we have to wait a year before we can get a harvest off of blackberries, is we have to wait for that cane to go through its first winter. And so that primocane versus floricane, and floricane being the second, is a little important for what we're going to talk about later. But keep that in mind, that you have to have this kind of renewal, and so growers are always taking care of next year's crop while they're harvesting the previous year's canes, essentially. Blackberry season, really, the bulk of harvest occurs in Arkansas in June through late July or early August. But for growers, that season actually kicks off a lot earlier. We typically have bud break, where those canes start to send out new leaves in March. And then we have flowering that occurs sometime in April. From a flower, and you can see the picture here, the white flower, some varieties do have pink petals. To a ripe blackberry is about 45 days. So we have flowering in April, and then we can have the beginning of harvest sometime in late May, June, depending on how the season progresses. Anybody ever heard of a term called blackberry winter? Is anybody? Yeah. It's kind of an old term. Sometimes people will use it a lot in spring when we have a freeze sometime in April that's a little unexpected. Oops. Unfortunately, blackberry winter is called that because very often we get a freeze during the bloom period for blackberries. And of course, if the temperature gets below about 27 degrees Fahrenheit, that will kill those blackberry flowers. And of course, if you have a flower that's not pollinated and is killed, you don't get any blackberries. And so this is a real risk for our growers in Arkansas, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the ways that we've been trying to get around this, because particularly with our changing climate and weather patterns, it can be really risky for growers to produce these kinds of crops because you get one go at it. If the plants flower and then the flowers are killed, you basically don't get a crop that year. But let's talk about what blackberries look like globally. Worldwide, there's probably somewhere around 300,000 acres of blackberries. And that may not sound like a lot, but all those 300,000 acres have probably been planted within the last 25 years or so. Blackberries are a crop that is very recently domesticated, so they used to only rely on wild plantings, and then as breeding started to pick the crop up, we've really expanded into a more cultivated market. Here in Arkansas, we only have around 300 acres, and so you may be thinking, wow, why do we have a blackberry scientist here in Arkansas talking about this if our acreage is less than 1% of the total globally? But I'm going to get to that here in a second. However, those 300 acres can be incredibly high value crop for small growers in rural Arkansas. Typically, we've done surveys with growers that they're averaging to sell fruit for around $8 per pound, depending on where they're at in the state. And average yields can vary anywhere from 10 to 12,000 pounds per acre. So it can be a very high value crop for growers. Now, as Mandy mentioned, there's really a global touch of the University of Arkansas on all those 300,000 acres. And I travel internationally occasionally for meetings for Blackberry conferences, which are a thing. And as soon as people see my name tag and see that it says University of Arkansas, they say, oh, you work on blackberries, don't you? And people know this worldwide. And it's something that I think is underappreciated in the state, and that's why I like to ask, how many of you have eaten a blackberry number one? And hopefully by the end of this, you'll be inspired to eat more Arkansas-grown blackberries as well. But the way that the University of Arkansas has impacted those 300,000 acres of blackberries globally really traces back to the activity that is happening here in this picture. This is a picture from the University of Arkansas Fruit Research Station in Clarksville, Arkansas. And this is the research location where much of the blackberry research takes place and where the University of Arkansas Fruit Breeding Program is located. So this is actually a picture of one of our blackberry plots for my PhD student's fertility trial. She was looking at different rates of nitrogen and how that impacts fruit quality. And then there down the hill, you can start to see the beginning of many of the plots from the blackberry breeding program. And this breeding program has a very long history. It was actually started back in 1964 by Jim Moore, who you can see there on the left-hand side. John Clark took over the program in the 90s and then just recently retired in 2023. If you all have never had John Clark come and speak at a meeting, I highly encourage you to invite him. He's retired, but he is from South Mississippi, and he can tell stories like no one else I've ever met in my life. And he also plays guitar, so occasionally he has some songs he's written about blackberries, and he's a very entertaining character. But he retired, and then the program was passed to Dr. Margaret Worthington in 2016, and she currently leads this program. The varieties that have been developed through this program, as Mandy alluded to, have now been spread and are grown globally. So we like to joke that the only continent where Arkansas developed blackberries aren't grown is Antarctica, and that's just because the little penguins, unfortunately, don't have the right climate for it. But there's really Arkansas-grown blackberries in any producing region of the world. And I want to give you just kind of a snapshot of some of the varieties that have been developed. There's over 20 different varieties that are publicly available and many more that have been developed and have private agreements. But you'll notice that starting in the 1970s, varieties started to be released. Those are on the left-hand side. A lot of these have names that pay tribute to the native peoples of Arkansas, so they have Native American names. But some of the things that over the time that the breeding program has been able to develop are thornlessness and primocane fruiting. So thornlessness was a huge development because it made it a lot easier to grow blackberries and a lot easier to harvest. When those varieties were first developed in the late 1980s and early 90s, it really made it a lot more enticing for people to grow blackberries commercially. The thing that was kind of unique about when they first discovered thornless blackberries was that those varieties have some sort of genetic linkage that also gives them disease resistance to double blossom, which historically was a very devastating disease. And so not only were the varieties easier to grow because they were thornless, they were also more disease resistant. The second development that's been really pivotal is primocane fruiting. So at the beginning of the presentation, I told you about you have to hold the cane over to the second year, and then it flowers on the floricane on the second year cane. We actually now have varieties that are primocane fruiting, so they actually flower on the first year cane. That means you don't have to carry the cane over, so there's less pruning, and you also can have a more extended season because those primocane fruiting blackberries also flower in the later season, so they're more of a fall producing crop. And then since then we've had several other varieties as well. I've bolded a few there in particular that are our most popular. If you are on the fence about whether or not you like blackberries, the one that I suggest you ask about when you go to do a pick your own is Ponca. If you think you don't like Ponca, you haven't had or you think you don't like blackberries, you haven't had a Ponca yet. Ponca is incredibly sweet, very juicy, small seeds. It's the one that I think can turn any blackberry hater into a blackberry lover. But I want to focus on this primocane fruiting development because this has really changed the global blackberry market and has opened up where blackberries are grown to a larger extent. In our climate, we have really, today is a beautiful day, but you remember 2 weeks ago what the temperatures were like in Arkansas. Those high temperatures, when we have that flowering on those late primocanes, is really detrimental to those flowers and their ability to set fruit. However, if you grow those same varieties in California that has a much more mild climate, they can have a really extended 8 or 9 month growing season for blackberries. And I want to share just a little bit briefly on kind of how that has impacted pricing and volumes in the blackberry market for the US. So I'm going to lead you through this graph because it's a little bit complicated, but if you look at all of those bars that are going up and down, you'll notice that they go from 1 to 52, so that's every week of the year. And this is just showing you how much fruit is coming into the US market from different sources each week of the year. And the color of the bar tells you where that fruit is coming from. So that you'll notice that in the US, the majority of our blackberry fruit is in the blue bar, meaning that it's coming from Mexico. So right now, we don't produce enough blackberries compared to the amount that we consume year-round. And then you'll see that about week 25, it switches, and we start to have some more domestic production from California and Oregon. If you look at the blue line that goes across, that tracks the price. So you can see that the price actually peaks towards what would be our late summer, and is lower when fruit is being produced in Mexico in the off-season. And so this gives us a real opportunity here in Arkansas because our season perfectly matches that window as the price starts to increase and peak in that late season. And that late season actually corresponds to when primocane fruiting blackberries come into production. And so the development of those varieties that now hit that target window has really helped growers really maximize their returns because they're able to produce fruit now targeting that window. I will say that this is primarily information that is helpful for a shipping market, so people who are growing for large scale and shipping to grocery stores. A lot of our local producers are not held to this same kind of market influence, and the demand for Arkansas-grown blackberries at farmers markets is still through the roof, and growers can't grow enough. And so we still have people continuing to increase acreage every year. So the breeding program has done a lot of things to maximize the acceptability of blackberries in the market in terms of being thornless, having new growing seasons, better flavor, etc. But the University of Arkansas also has a lot of faculty members that do research trying to address some of the other limitations of blackberry production. And I've listed some of those here. So we talked a little bit about that weather can be detrimental. If we ever freeze at the wrong time, if it's really hot in the summer, that can negatively impact fruit quality. You know, blackberries are all hand harvested for the fresh market. So if you go to and you buy your little clamshell of blackberries, every single one of those berries was picked off by hand and placed in that clamshell and was generally picked and then put into a cooler within a couple of hours to try and maximize shelf life. And so there's a ton of labor needs, there's a lot of perishability issues, supply and demand is in constant flux. In years where we have really bad weather in the spring, that means that nobody has as many blackberries because we had a lot of loss due to freeze, and so the price can increase. But we have faculty that are working on all of these different aspects, trying to address them. I have a colleague in the engineering department in Fayetteville who is currently working on developing a mechanical harvester for blackberries, and so that's requires a lot of finesse of figuring out what kind of force strength do you need the robot to have so that it doesn't squish the blackberry. I have colleagues that are working on pests, post-harvest handling, and then I wanted to share one just anecdote of a project that we've done that has been really fun to try and address several of these issues, and that a lot of our growers are now using here in Arkansas. And so this is a system that we evaluated that was originally developed for northern production of blackberries, but we were interested in trying to use it to mitigate some of our climate issues with hot summers and freezes in the spring here in Arkansas. In this picture, you may notice that the blackberry, instead of being grown straight up and down, the whole plant is laid over on its side. And so that's where the rotating cross arm comes from. What's unique about this system is that you can actually lay the entire plant down on the ground. And in the spring, if you do that, if you have the plant laid over, you all know what happens if you put a plant close to a window, right? It starts to lean towards the sun. So if you have a plant laid over in the spring, as it starts to break bud, all those buds and flowers will grow up towards the sun as well. They all break on one side. And that means all the flowers come out on one side. And then in the spring, if you stand it up and lean it over, because all the flowers were all on one side of the trellis, now all of the fruit is going to be on one side of the trellis. So we've manipulated how the plant grows just by manipulating how plants respond to sunlight. What you may notice about how that trellis is oriented is that all the fruit is now in the shade. And so the fruit actually is about 10 degrees cooler than if it was exposed to the sun. So we have much better fruit quality, fewer losses. The picker gets to stand in the shade, which is a huge boon in Arkansas in the summer. And we have this oriented east-west so that we get that shade effect. But then we also have this ability, because we can lay the plants down, we can lay them down in the winter and protect them with a blanket if we need to protect from some of those freezes. So basically, from using this system, we've seen that we can reduce losses due to freezes in the spring, reduce losses due to sunburn essentially in the summer, that we can increase harvest efficiency, so less labor. And we've also shown that because we're growing the plant in a very narrow canopy, that reduces pest pressure because specifically spotted winged Drosophila, which is a little fruit fly, has nowhere to hide in the summer in the middle of the day where it's really hot. So we actually can reduce pesticide use as well from using this system. So if you go to some farms here in Arkansas, you'll get to see this. It's also become a marketing tool because it creates a beautiful wall of blackberry fruit, like you can see here. So this is fruit that's well on its way to being ripened. And so people love to go out with their kids, harvest off of this in the shade, take a selfie in front of this beautiful wall of fruit, and it's been a great marketing tool. And this is some of the research that we've done here in Arkansas to help our growers address some of these issues. I want to end on just mentioning that Arkansas has a Blackberry Growers Association. This association is fairly new. It's only been around for about 5 years. But I do encourage you to check out their website. They have a list of all the farms that are members of the association there, and you can find out where you can go and pick blackberries locally. They also do a lot of marketing and promotional activities surrounding blackberries in Arkansas. And this past year, they did a campaign called Pick AR Blackberries, where they're setting up at farmers markets around the state and doing taste tests with kids and trying to encourage kids to taste blackberries, get a feel for what they're like, and eat more blackberries. So I'd encourage all of you also to eat more Arkansas-grown blackberries. And with that, I'll conclude, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Microphones here, so 1 second.
Oh, hey, thank you. My blackberry bushes are gigantic right now. I think they're Arapahoes, but I've done Apaches too. I have several questions. Should I prune them back because they're just gigantic? And if I should, when? And then if I want to put ponca in, can they be right next to them, or do I need some separation?
All
Pollination
great questions. I want to put a plug in too. We have a YouTube series that's called Arkansas Blackberry School that has videos on how to prune blackberries. So I'll explain to you now how to do it, but then go check out the videos because it'll remind you how to follow through. Yeah, so the thing about a blackberry plant is when those new canes come up, they will just grow and grow and grow, and they'll be 12 foot long by the end of the summer. The way to maximize your yield on a blackberry plant is when that cane comes up and gets about shoulder high, go out there and tip the end out of it. And when you tip the end out of it, it's going to branch out, and then at the ends of all the branches is where you'll get fruit the next year. You may have missed that opportunity for this year. It happens. They get away from us. You can still do it, but the ideal time to do it is in June. And then after those canes have branched out in the winter, in January, those canes will then have, the side branches will have gotten, another 24 inches long, and you want to cut those back to about 12 to 18 inches in January, February, and then they'll be ready to wake back up in the spring.
Should I cut them 5 or 6 feet, or should I go all the way out?
So yeah, cut the canes back to about 5 to 6 feet. And poncas you can plant right next to your Apaches or Arapahoes, they'll be just fine. There may be some cross-pollination, but the only way that you would see the cross-pollination would be if you tried to collect the seeds out of that fruit and plant it out. It would be a cross between those two varieties, but it would result in some weird stuff, so I wouldn't recommend you doing that. But the fruit will come true to type on the plants. Excellent question, yeah.
Yeah, along the same lines, if we wanted to start a blackberry, growing them at home, what does that look like and how difficult is it to do that?
So I think blackberries are probably one of the easiest fruits to grow in the home garden. Ponca is a variety that would work really well for the home garden because our first question was about Arapaho and Apache getting super long. Ponca is actually a semi-dwarf. So even on a mature plant, it only gets about yay high instead of getting 12 foot tall. So it's a lot easier to keep contained even if you only had one plant. And on blackberries, you can get away with just having a single blackberry plant. You don't need the cross-pollination. There's several places where you can buy plants in Arkansas and online. We actually have a list on our website that's called the licensed propagators. So those are nurseries that are licensed to propagate University of Arkansas varieties. Essentially, they have to pay a small royalty for the plants that they're propagating. I would suggest getting plants, either a bare root dormant plant or a little plug plant that will have green leaves, and planting it in the spring. You can also plant now if you were able to find plants for ponca, if that's the variety you're interested in. And I would highly encourage you to plant ponca. The flavor is very good. Consistently wins our taste tests. You could also plant it here in September, but plant before like October 15th or so. And it'll root in, and you'll not get much fruit next year, but the following year you would, after the canes grow in. But definitely check out the Arkansas Blackberry School YouTube. We have videos about how to prune, how to fertilize, how to trellis, everything that you need.
So all this is very confusing to me, and I'm pretty sure I would kill it if I tried to grow it. So I'm going to put a plug in for my favorite drive-through orchard, which is close to us, Barn Hill Orchards in Lonoke County where you can get your favorite strawberries, you can get your blueberries, Mitch, and you can get delicious blackberries. So I'm sure you're familiar with them.
Yes, yes. Yes, Barnhills are a member of the Blackberry Association, so you'll definitely find them on that website, and they use some of the rotating cross-arm trellis as well. So, yeah, there's several good farms in the area where you can get locally grown if you don't want to try and grow your own.
What about preservation? I always find that blackberries have a little more fungus on them than the blueberries. Blueberries seem like they last forever, but I guess the blackberry has less resistance to it. What do you do about that problem?
Yeah, so I'm assuming what you're seeing is you hold them in the refrigerator and they start to get a little fuzzy or sunken in. Yeah, that's part of that. Growers are going to pick them and get them to you probably the next day because they want them to be to you as quick as possible if you're buying them local. Blackberries freeze really, really well, and so that's a great way to try and preserve them if you want to buy them and then have them for later season. A lot of our local growers are also starting to do some value-added products where they're developing jams and jellies and that kind of thing. So if you're into further processing, you can also preserve the season, so to speak, that way. But they freeze really great. You can put them on a tray individually, freeze them, and then throw them in a Ziploc, and they'll last for a year, probably.
Yeah. Any research on seedless blackberry?
I knew I would get at least one question. So getting to seedless is going to be very hard. There is a program that the University of Arkansas has collaborated with a private company called Pairwise Genetics, where they worked with the University of Arkansas, USDA Corvallis that also has a breeding program, and North Carolina State University that also has a public blackberry breeding program. So those are the only 3 public programs, meaning that they're developing varieties that are available to all growers. Worked with Pairwise to develop a seedless blackberry. So there does exist in the world a seedless blackberry. It's not currently grown because the problem with having the seedlessness is that it shrinks fruit size dramatically. And so they're trying to figure out now how to maintain fruit size but retaining the small seed. And it wouldn't be truly seedless, it would have a seed trace, so you probably wouldn't notice it. So it's in the works, but there are some varieties that have smaller seeds in them than some of the older varieties, and so Ponca would be one to me that you should try and see, because I know the seeds can be off-putting for certain people. The other thing that I'll put a plug in for, and this is a completely different berry, but because you brought up blueberries, I'm going to bring up muscadines. How many people have had a muscadine? So seedless muscadines are a thing, and that's another project that the University of Arkansas is very involved in, is developing seedless muscadines, which to me, seeds in a muscadine is much more noticeable than a seed in a blackberry. And so keep your eyes peeled. We have a muscadine field day in a few days, next week, and we'll be doing a taste test with growers on all the new seedless varieties. But great question.
Since you've done the research on the blackberries, I was wondering, I guess when I was growing up, of course, they had thorns. So is there a reason why they had the thorns, or are they trying to protect themselves from something? Or?
Yeah. So it's just a protection element for the plant to keep large herbivores from eating them. And unfortunately, now that we have thornless blackberries, growers now have to fence their fields to keep deer out. Because as soon as we got the thornless ones, the deer will go in there and strip the plants. So it's a protector mechanism to keep the plant from being defoliated.
Happy? Oh, thank you. You're speaking my love language.
Oh, good.
All food, but especially berries. I love all berries. I will say strawberries are my favorite, but blackberries are number 2. So I'm fascinated about the Ponca strain. I'm really curious about that, so I will seek that out. I've been buying, I have a restaurant, so I buy everything I possibly can locally. And for the first time this year, along with Esau's Corn and Dumas, they were packaging their blackberries.
Yes.
Is that a new crop for them?
So In chatting with him, they have been growing blackberries for several years, but they planted some new varieties in the last few years and increased the acreage that they have. And so I think their ability to ship increased, whereas previously they were really only supplying the local market.
Well, we
there.
were delighted to
Yes.
be privy to that bounty. And this is my personal tip, if you like blackberries, we infused vodka with blackberries and made a killer blackberry margarita. So now for the fall, we are trying it in bourbon. So you know where to come check that out in a few weeks.
I was surprised at the profitability you mentioned per pound for an acre of blackberries. Sorry. What would it be the cost to somebody that wanted to do that? Like, just say they already had the land, but just for the plants that would produce that much.
Yeah, so that's a great question. We used to have an enterprise budget so that we could hand it to growers and say, this is kind of what it would cost to plant an acre. With the cost of everything increasing so dramatically over the last few years, it really needs to be updated. Typically for a new little blackberry plant, for a really healthy one that's been virus tested, is about $3 per plant. And you're looking at about 900 plants per acre. So we estimate that probably to plant an acre of blackberries is in the range of $15,000 to $25,000 with labor, irrigation, etc. And so you're out that amount for that first year, but most growers make that money back the first year after planting. Great question.
Does the U of A make any money off of its secret DNA strands that are across the world? And then secondly, many of the varieties were attributed to Native American names. Is there any unusual significance to how that came about?
Can you repeat that question or paraphrase it for us?
Yeah, so the two questions were, does the U of A able to make money off of the varieties that they develop and then make available? And the second question was origin of the naming or use of the Native American tribe names to label the blackberries. So yes, the University of Arkansas does operate under a royalty program. So every variety that they develop, that they release to the propagators essentially is the one that pays the royalty. So usually it's something like 25 cents per plant or something like that, that gets paid back to the university. And so that funding then goes back into developing more varieties. The cost at the propagator level then gets passed on to the grower when they buy that plant. And that model has been very successful in keeping the program running and being able to be very prolific. Typically a single variety, if it gets released today, it was probably crossed and selected 10 years ago. So it took 10 years of development before they're ready to release it. So there's a lot of time and money invested in developing a single blackberry variety. And so that royalty program has really been helpful in making the programs be able to still be public, where varieties are released and growers are able to access them. There's a lot of private breeding programs that release varieties that you have to be a member of a club or you have to pay a subscription fee in order to access those varieties. And so having the public program, I think, is a huge thing, and that it's based in Arkansas is amazing, because they're selecting varieties that grow well in our climate. So if it grows well up in Clarksville, it's going to grow well in Little Rock. The selection of using the Native American names, I've talked to John Clark a little bit about this, and he was kind of one of the ones that was working with Jim Moore when they originally started doing that. And the idea is that blackberries are a native crop to Arkansas, and so they wanted to honor the native peoples of Arkansas. And so they have tried to use as many of the native tribe names as they've gone along. Unfortunately for us in Arkansas, we know how to pronounce some of those names, but as you start to get further outside of Arkansas, the pronunciation of Owachita and Osage, and it starts to get where there's also been some education of people about how those names are pronounced. Unfortunately, that we've sort of switched gears, and then the newer varieties are going to have a different naming system. Margaret Worthington, who's the current lead, kind of joked that she wanted to start naming all the varieties after female country music stars, so like Reba, and, but the lawyers did not like that idea. So we're going to have to come up with a different tradition starting now.
I think we have one more.
We don't get the opportunity to ask about fertilization a lot in Rotary, so I wanted to ask a quick question on, a couple years ago we heard about trouble with bee populations. Can you spend a quick second just talking about pollinators and how they affect us?
Yeah, that's a great question. So blackberries are both bee pollinated and wind pollinated. So in order to get maximum fruit size, you do want to have a healthy bee population. So most growers will have beehives that they stock in their fields. So, maybe 1 to 2 hives per acre. And growers are very aware of taking care of those bees. So they're very careful about if they need to make some kind of pesticide application, that they make that application in the late evening after the bees have already gone back to the hive, because they recognize the value that those pollinators have on, you have more pollinators, you have bigger fruit size. If you have too small of berries, it's probably because it was raining and the bees were not active during that period. But wind can also help with pollination. And so when we grow blackberries, and I didn't want to talk about this very much, but we're now even growing blackberries in greenhouses. They will put bees inside of the greenhouses and also walk around with leaf blowers to make sure that they get adequate pollination in there. Great questions. Well, thank you all.
First of all, an apology. If I had any idea we could have had blackberry-infused vodka for lunch, that was a missed opportunity on my part. We will do better next time. And my father, 50 years ago, would make muscadine wine at the house, so that nothing sounds hillbilly more than muscadine wine in South Arkansas, so fully familiar with all of those things. You say 300 acres in Arkansas compared to 1.5 million acres of rice. And the fact that Arkansas is globally known for both fascinates me. I love that about this state. Thank you for all of that. That was worth waiting a year for me, so I appreciate that. We are grateful you are here. And you may not know this, some of you should know this by now, that we have a partnership with the Department of Human Services to provide books to the 5 juvenile justice centers, the homes for young people who've committed crimes who are in rehabilitation. They've asked us to provide books for their libraries to help them with literacy efforts. And we are committed this year to providing at least 2 homes, 2 of the justice homes, full libraries for them through a partnership with another organization who's already paid for one. We've now have up to 3, and we are going to be donating books in your name to one of these facilities. In the actual book, there'll be a book jacket that will read something to this effect, given this is in honor of you. As we invest in the lives of these young people, as you are growing greatness for Arkansas, we want them to know that we are investing in them as both Rotary Club, and we'll have a gift in your name there that it will be part of that package that we donate. So we appreciate that and appreciate you being here for this. Next week, as I mentioned, Shannon Newton, who leads the Arkansas Trucking Association, will be here to talk about the ups and downs of the trucking industry in the last few years, and given that Arkansas's unique place in the universe with trucking, you're going to hear the latest update on where that is. We hope you're back for that, and we hope you have a great rest of the day. We're adjourned.